Hey everybody, Justin here. And welcome to something a little different than what I normally do on the channel. I've done these countdowns, I've done a couple of them um, in the past. My least favorite keyboards, me being a keyboardist, the least favorite keyboards that I've played in my lifetime, and the most favorite. So now we're going to go over my top 10 favorite albums of all time. So these are albums that I've loved since childhood. So I'm 41 now. I was born in 1983, and I was kind of raised on, listening to albums more so. I mean, I listened to the radio a lot anytime my mom and my dad or my stepdad. I mean, my parents did. So I did listen to the radio quite a bit, but I did a lot of listening to albums, and even throughout high school where it was more towards the trend of just individual songs. Like I know friends that would buy a CD just for like a couple of songs and then ignore the rest of the album, which I don't really do. There are some artists where I like a few songs, but not maybe the entire catalog, or I just haven't had time to explore a full album from any particular artist. But for the most part, I like to listen to albums. I mean, I've got a couple of playlists on Tidal, which is my streaming service of choice, but typically I'll only use a streaming platform if I'm away from the house. So if I'm out and about, I'll usually use streaming for convenience purposes. But when I'm here, I usually just listen to albums, cassettes, CDs, whatever feel like throwing on. I mean, I got a whole, you know, shelf full of albums back here, so um, yeah. And I will say, and I probably mentioned this in one of the other streams, that I've always been a lover of vinyl. Um, Always been a fan of records. The artwork, the experience of putting the record on the turntable, and interacting with it, and not only that, but you know owning all this music instead of streaming it. Um, Even when um, other kids around, maybe when I was growing up, like fourth, fifth, sixth grade up through 12th. So you're talking maybe the 90s up to the 2000s. Um, Most of my schoolmates, actually nearly all of my schoolmates, were either listening cassettes. I kind of was. I was doing that too, or had moved on to CDs. But I've always still listened to albums, even when vinyl, fell out of favor in the '90s up until mm, I'd say the 2000s. And then we have the whole boom of vinyl coming back, and it never went away from me. I have always loved vinyl, but I picked. I kind of was thinking back, from my childhood, from maybe the time when I was 5 or 6, probably 6, maybe even earlier than that. I know definitely earlier than that for one particular album, but albums that have stuck with me pretty much, throughout my life, ever since the first time I ever remember, hearing an album, but not only hearing an album, but knowing who the band was. And I guess I'll have some stories to talk about, when I first heard these albums. So, with that in mind, why don't we jump into the countdown? All right. And these are, like I said, these are all time favorite albums, albums that have stuck with me through childhood. If I was going to pick favorite albums like right now, the list would be different because that kind of list would change from day to day. If I was going to pick a top 100 favorite albums, we would probably wind up doing that in, chunks of 10, like, episodes. So, which I don't know, I might do at some point, like a top 20 or a top 50, like albums any given, time, like, or date. Like, if I was going to do that today, it would be like, oh, top 10 favorite albums as of Tuesday, May 6th, 2025. But anyway, here we go. My top 10 favorite albums of all time. Number 10, and some of these might surprise you. Number 10, Sports by Huey Lewis and the News. Um, I love this band. I have their first 5 albums. Um, their first one probably being my least favorite because I don't think they found their sound yet. It was more power pop, new wave than it was. But by the time you got to the second album, Picture This, you started hearing, the pop sensibility that you would find in an album like this, like in a song like "Do You Believe in Love" or "Working for a Living." That's where that sound, there's what I would consider their signature sound, kind of started. But then you get to the juggernaut that is this album, and how many hits are on this? The Heart of Rock and Roll, Heart and Soul, I Want a New Drug, If This Is It, probably my favorite tune on the album. I don't know, I'm a sucker for cool chord changes and arrangements and things like that. But I would say the highlights for me on this album, definitely If This Is It, Walking on a Thin Line, Finally Found a Home, and definitely the first side of this album. But I love this whole album. It's so good. Um, the first time I heard it, I was probably, I want to say 7, maybe 8, and I borrowed a cassette of it. I have an aunt that had a huge tape library, and me with my CDO, and for those that don't know what CDO is, it's OCD, but the letters have to be in alphabetical order. But she had this on cassette, and I had heard the name Huey Lewis in the News, at some point in time. I don't know if it was something that I watched on MTV, because I used to watch MTV when I was like 5 or 6, and not really watch it, but just listen to, different music videos. But I definitely heard, some Huey Lewis in the News stuff, and my ears perked up. I liked it a lot. But I would say with this album, the second I heard "If This Is It," it was like, oh, I know that song. I've heard it on the radio. It was my dad at the time. My parents were divorced when I was really really young, but my dad was into listening to like soft rock and easy listening radio stations, and um, I forget which radio station it was, but I heard "If This Is It," and my ears perked up, but I had no idea who the band was. But as soon as I heard this album, I was like, oh, okay, that's that band. So ever since then, after that album, I heard an album called Four, which was their fourth album that had even more hits on it. It had Stuck With You, Hip to Be Square, Jacob's Ladder. Those were like the 3 big ones. There was another one off that album. Doing It All for My Baby was the fourth hit off of that, but I love that whole album too. So I would say Sports and Four are my 2 favorite Huey Lewis and the News albums. So once again, coming in at number 10 of my top 10 favorite albums of all time is Sports by Huey Lewis and the News. Coming in at number 9, debut album from the Cars. Classic, classic, classic album. Did I mention it was a classic album? So I was given a stack of albums, I think when I was 6, from my mom, and it had a couple Cars albums in it. It had this one, and it had Candio. Um, I didn't get an appreciation for this album until later on in life. Maybe I was in middle school, like 4th through 6th grade. So back in the 90s, middle school was different than what it is now. Um, Maybe even 7th grade, because I had borrowed it from my uncle, and I've got an uncle that has a huge vinyl collection, probably more than I have, but he's got all kinds of stuff in there. Um, but anyway, I remember the very first Cars album that I ever heard was Heartbeat City from 1984, and that had Drive was like the big, big hit off of that. It also had You Might Think, Magic, Hello Again. But I think I was either 3 or 4 when I first heard that album. I was probably 3. I could be very, very wrong. But I had heard the album and I had no idea who the band was. So I wasn't going to pick that one as a top 10. But as soon as I heard this album, like I said, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, I had probably by that time had heard all of the hits off of this album on the radio. So Good Times Roll, My Best Friend's Girl, Just What I Needed, You're All I've Got Tonight, and Moving in Stereo. Those were like the 5 that I've heard, on the radio. So as soon as I got got a hold of this album, threw it on, and again, middle school was when I really got to appreciate what a classic album this is. Like, oh, I heard that song. Oh, I know that one. Oh, I know that one. Um, so yeah, it's such a classic album. Greg Hawk's keyboard work. It's simple yet it makes a statement. Um, Something I've always liked about the Cars is their arrangements, especially when you talk about keyboards and synthesizers and stuff, things like that. So there it is, coming in at number 9, the debut album from the Cars. Coming in at number 8, Face the Music by Electric Light Orchestra. So here's the story of this album. There is an amusement park probably about 45 minutes from where I live, maybe an hour from where I live, called Funtown Splashtown USA, and which has many, many, many different rides. But one of the mainstays of that park is a ride called the Astrosphere. Yes, that's how you pronounce it, Astrosphere. And what it is it's a scrambler ride inside a dome. Used to be an air-filled, hot air dome, but I think they've redone it several years ago. They made it into a concrete dome, but you get on this ride, scrambler, and then they play this one song, and there's a light show, with lasers and pictures of aliens or whatever on the on the ceiling of the dome. But the song that they play in that ride is a song called Fire on High, and it's kind of a chopped up custom mix of the song on that ride. But as soon as I heard that song and that ride, now you got to remember I have autism spectrum disorder, so as a young kid, there were some rides that I liked, but some that I hated. Like I was scared to death of going into a dark ride. So, but as soon as I come off of it, off of the ride for the first time, I was probably in like 4th or 5th grade. It's like, you know what? I kind of like that ride, but I really liked the song, and I knew the band, Electric Light Orchestra, because another couple of albums that my mom had in a little stack of albums she gave me was a compilation called Ole ELO, which had some of the hits off of their first 5 albums, but then she also had Out of the Blue, which I have in there. Another great double album, but so I was given an opportunity. I had gotten a good report card in 7th grade, like straight A's, like right down, which is a very rare thing for somebody like me who can't stand math, who can't stand social studies. But as a reward, I got to go to a record store and pick out a couple albums. And it was a local record store in Sanford that sadly is no longer there anymore. But I said, "Oh, what's the ELO album that has what is it? Fire on High," was the name of the song. So this was one of the albums I picked up. The other one was The Long Run by the Eagles, which is probably my favorite Eagles album. So that's where I got this album. So I heard that song opens the album, and what an album opener that is. But then you get to Waterfall, which is absolutely gorgeous, and then you have Evil Woman and Strange Magic, which were the 2 big hits off of this album. But I love this album. I really really enjoy this album. This would probably, if I was going to rank the Electric Light Orchestra catalog, this would be either number one or number two, depending on which, when you ask me. So, number 8 is Face the Music by Electric Light Orchestra. Number 7, Infinity by Journey. I have a long history with this band. I first heard the Evolution album. I knew the name of the band. I want to say I was 5, and my dad. I was probably in preschool, and my dad had a small little stack of cassettes. He had REO Speedwagon, which more on that band a little later, but he also had the follow up to this Evolution, um, which is one of my favorite Journey albums. But so I've always liked Journey. Um, I remember when I was 7, one of my aunts brought over a couple of albums for me to have, as a gift. Just random, I guess. I don't know where she found them, probably at a yard sale, but one of them was Talking Head 77, which, at the time I was 7, so that music was a little bit over my head at the time. But the other one was Journey's Escape, which is their big juggernaut album that had Don't Stop Believing, Who's Crying Now, Open Arms. And as much as I love that album, that'd probably be a number 2 or a number 3 album for me. Um, I was given a huge stack of albums from my aunt on my mom's side, and I still have some of those. But the first 2 Journey albums with Steve Perry, this one and Evolution, which I got to have again, were in there. But as soon as I heard this, um, oh, Lights is on here, Wheel in the Sky. I knew those 2 songs. I knew Feeling That Way in Any Time because I had heard those played on classic rock radio, and they're usually played back to back. But I heard the rest of this album and I was blown away. Um, there's just so much going on. It's proggy in some spots, like on Winds of March. Um, I love the way you've got the 2 different singers. You have Steve Perry and you have Greg Raleigh on a couple of tunes. And I love anytime that those 2, share a song together. So Feeling That Way on this album, just the same way off of Evolution, and then off of Departure, which is the third album with Steve Perry. Someday Soon is the track. So I've always liked when those 2, sang. But I also love Greg Raleigh's keyboard playing. Just absolutely amazing. So there it is. So the highlights on this album for me are Feeling That Way at Any Time. I love Patiently. I absolutely love Winds of March. Like, those are the standout tracks for me on this particular. And also, the final track on the album, Open the Door. Um, Absolutely gorgeous. I love that tune. Um, so there it is. Number 7. Yes, number 7 for me is Infinity by Journey. Number 6. I probably would put his greatest hits album up here because I've been around that album as a child, but also Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, and the live album Here and There. But number 6 has got to be Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Um, so I've been an Elton John fan since I was 6 or 7, probably 6. My mom had gotten his greatest hits album at a Goodwill. I forget what I got, but we listened to that constantly, and I was hooked. So anytime I went to a Goodwill and got to pick out an album to get, or sometimes 2, um, anytime we found an Elton album in somewhat good condition, I'd grab it. So Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, but the live album Here and There, it was either that or the greatest hits album that my mom and my stepdad and I used to just listen to constantly. But as soon as I got this one, Um, I was already a fan of Funeral for a Friend and Love Lies Bleeding because there's a live version that appears on Here and There. Excuse me. It's actually quite good. Um, I got this, and immediately as soon as I heard the intro, I think I got this in middle school, 6th grade, 7th grade. I got a copy of this given to me. um, but as soon as I heard that multi-tracked ARP 2500 synth on Funeral for a Friend, that opening, which I believe consists of 2 or 3 shortened instrumental rearrangements of a couple of the other songs on this album. Um, just absolutely amazing. Um, yeah, so not only the piano work on here, anytime you hear any synth work on here, um, the first side of this pretty much is all radio classics. Like I've heard "Funeral for a Friend" and "Love Lies Bleeding" on the radio. Obviously, you have "Candle in the Wind," "Benny and the Jets," the title track. I've heard "Gray Seal" on classic rock radio from time to time. You also have the rocker that is "Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting." Um, but the other thing I love about this is the artwork. Beautiful painting on the front. But then when you open it up, it's a triple gatefold. There you've got the guys in the band, but then you have the lyrics to the songs. Sorry, I'm going to hide myself here, but you have the lyrics to the songs, but all this artwork that goes with each of the songs. That's the other thing I love about vinyl is the packaging. Very, very cool packaging. But yeah, so absolutely love this album. Is it my number one favorite Elton John album? Yes. Number two is very, very hard to pick. It could be Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy one day. It could be Rock of the Westies the next day. But it would be a toss-up between those two albums. So that is number 6. All right. Number 6, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Now we're down to the top 5. This one, coming in at number 5. I've had a very long history with this album. I think I was 6 when I first heard it, but it was another album that was played either on a car ride or around the house. When my mom was either doing dishes or doing some cleaning, this was on constantly. Third Stage by Boston. Yeah, look at that pipe organ spaceship, and right there is the Boston guitar shaped. Where am I? I'm looking at myself on a camera. There we go. Right there is the guitar shaped spaceship. So, Third Stage by Boston. Heard this album when I was 6. I was already familiar with Amanda because I had heard that on classic rock radio. That and We're Ready, so I knew both of those songs. But I absolutely love this album. That's not to say that I don't like either of the first two. I love the debut. I love Don't Look Back. Either one of those could be a very, very close second. But this is always going to be number 1 for me. And the reason is it's the first Boston album I've ever heard. But like I said, I was 6, and as soon as I heard the launch kick in and the way that this album sounded, oh, blown away. If you look at the liner notes on this album, on the inside, there's some little tidbits, here and there, over here, and then over here. We could talk about you can kind of read a little bit about the making of this album, which I absolutely think is really cool. But yeah, this is a special one for me. I love the launch into Cool the Engines, into My Destination, into when you go to the second side, A New World, and To Be a Man. But yeah, and then the epic that is Holly Ann, which closes this album. yeah, I love it. So number 5, Third Stage by Boston. All right, number 4 is The Game by Queen. This is an original copy. First press. So the second press and any pressings thereafter had kind of a more matte finish to it. It was like a grayish kind of finish. So this is the original copy. Um, I already knew the name Queen from, I want to say, my mom. In addition to having a small stack of albums, she had a handful of 45 7-inch singles. One of which was, I think, "We Will Rock You When We Are the Champions." She might have had another one, "Bites the Dust," in there, but I can't remember. Um, so I already knew the name Queen. So I think we got this at a yard sale or a flea market. I was probably 6 or 7 at the time. Um, and then I heard it, and like the opening, which is "Play the Game," blew my mind. um, and then the rest of this album just followed suit. Um, so obviously the hits off of here were "Another One Bites the Dust" and "Crazy Little Thing Called Love." "Play the Game" was a minor hit, um, but yeah, I love the whole album. So, and I still do to this day. The very first Queen album to feature synthesizers, which in this case was an Oberheim OBX. Before this album, in all of the other albums, prior to this one, they would have a note saying no synthesizers or no synths were used, in the making of the album. So basically, they were a band that used the recording studio as an instrument. Um, excuse me. Talk about having a frog in my throat. I think I got a toad in here. So yes, number 4 is "The Game" by Queen. Number 3. This one goes way, way, way back. Number 3, "Thriller" by Michael Jackson. Now, yes, Michael Jackson. um, Best-selling album of all time. 70 plus million copies worldwide. Probably more than that. Um, I want to say I was 4 or 5 when I first heard this album. And when I first heard "Beat It," and then "Billie Jean," and then "Human Nature," um, I don't know why, but my aunt at the time would always start with the second side. I think that might have been um, like her favorites, like her favorite songs on the album. But when you've got 7 singles off of an album that were at the very, very top of the charts at the time. I mean, think about it. You had "Wanna Be Starting Something," you had "The Girl Is Mine," "Thriller," "Beat It," "Billie Jean," "Human Nature," and "PYT." 7 out of the 9 singles. Honestly, I think if they were to release the other 2 songs, "The Lady in My Life" and "Baby Be Mine," those would have been hits too. There's a reason that this is the best selling album of all time. But later on, um, I then discovered that there were some members of my favorite band of all time, which we will hear about in a couple of albums from now. I'm kind of giving you a little bit of a hint. Did some work on this album. One of the guys from Toto even wrote one of the songs on this album, "Human Nature." Um, but the sound quality, the production, the arrangements, every time I listen to this album, I hear something different that I didn't hear, the previous time I heard it. Whether it's a synth line or some sound coming here, coming from, who knows where. Um, this is just a masterclass in how to record a pop album. As far as I'm concerned, it's a perfect album from start to finish. Actually, I would say, in my opinion, everything in the top 10 is a near perfect album from start to finish. But um, especially the top, 5. So anyway, coming in at number 3, Thriller by Michael Jackson. Number 2, oh, this one's a special one. Number 2, High Infidelity by REO Speedwagon. Not the most, classy album cover, if you know what I mean, but um oh, I was either 3 or I was 4 when I first heard this album, and it was my late father um who introduced me to REO Speedwagon. Told me who the band was, and he put the album on, and it's probably one of maybe a couple of the things that we listened to back when I was, a kid. Before I think I moved in with mom. I think I was 6 probably. Um, so I loved the entire album. Some people might say, "Oh, there's a couple of throwaway tracks on here." This is such a special album to me. And then I didn't own it until I was maybe 7 and got to pick an album out, from Goodwill. So this was one of the albums that I picked out as soon as I saw it. But Don't Let 'Em Go, Keep on Loving You, Take It on the Run. Say Keep on Loving You and Take It on the Run were the two big, juggernaut hits on this album. But I would say this is my number 1 favorite REO Speedwagon album. The keyboard work from Neil Doughty, especially the synth solo in Don't Let 'Em Go. You've also got a cool piano solo in Shaking It Loose. But then you've got the ferocious guitar work of the late, great Gary Richrath, who, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated guitar players that doesn't get talked about enough. You listen to his couple of solos on Don't Let 'Em Go or on Take It on the Run, some of the work on Tough Guys. It's just so good. Yeah, such a special album for me. So that's number 2, High Infidelity by REO Speedwagon. Kinda. Yeah, I'm looking at your comment. Kinda, but you know what? They're special to me. These are my favorites. And for some reason I latched onto them. I know a bunch of kids who absolutely hated the music their parents listened to, at the time. But you know what? For me, I never got into the stuff that other kids, my age, around you talking about the '90s or the 2000s, were into at the time. It was always what was current. Anything from the past was like, no, that's no. No, you gotta listen to Green Day or Nirvana or Alanis Morissette or any of this. Like, no, I don't dig on that. Um, but you got to remember, I was 4 when I heard High Infidelity, and knowing who the band was, and it just grabbed me. Um, I will say I wasn't an Elton John fan when I first heard him, and I don't know if it was the voice or something else. Um, but 7, or when I was 6 or 7, my mom got the Greatest Hits album. Um, Something clicked, and I think it was because I knew he was a piano player, and I had been playing around with keyboards since I was like 3 or 4. So there was that kind of common thread. I think when you find a common thread with an artist, that's what makes you kind of latch onto them a little more. But anyway, I digress. Number 1, Toto 4. This is the Master Sound audiophile half speed mastered version. Um, my absolute favorite band of all time. My absolute favorite album of all time. Um, there is not a bad song on this album. Um, oh, what can I say? I heard so my history with this album. Um, I knew the name Toto, and I knew the name Toto from hearing Pamela, which is off of the Seventh One album, on a cassette, on a various artist cassette compilation I forget what the name of it is, but it had like 8 songs on it. Some of the stuff really stood out to me quite a bit. Some of the stuff I was like, yeah, I'm not a big fan of. Um, but Pamela was one of the things that stood out to me. So I knew the name Toto. Um, I had heard, I know I heard Africa and Rosanna on the radio constantly. More so, Rosanna was more memorable to me um, because of the name of the song. And really, it was like the pre-chorus that grabbed me. That not quite a year since she went away, Rosanna, where it got like really quiet. But I didn't know the name of the band until I got from Goodwill in 95, 96. I got a compilation called Golden Platinum, and I think there were like 4 or 5 albums in that series, and the single version of Rosanna was on there. Um, and I was like, okay, I need to get this album just because it's got this song on it. So I did, and I'm probably 10 or 11 trying to figure out that keyboard solo. Which, as soon as I heard that, my mind was completely blown. Like, what is this? Like, everything that was going on in that solo, all the different, like, pieces. How are they doing this? How are they doing this? That's what really started me on wanting to get into synthesizers. Okay, how can I create that sound? I had a keyboard that had, 120 presets, and it was like a home Casio. No, it was a Radio Shack keyboard. Um, and it was basically their version of the Casio CTK 500. So I guess at the time Casio was manufacturing keyboards for Radio Shack, so that Radio Shack could put their name on it. But anyway, um, remember that stack of albums that I talked about that I got in junior high from my aunt on my mom's side that had that Journey album in it. It had that Huey Lewis and the News album. Um, it also had Toto 4 in it. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, as soon as I can get the chance, I'm putting this album on. I'm listening to it all the way through. And I listened to it all the way through, and I can't explain the feeling that I felt when listening to each of these songs. Obviously Rosanna, and then you get to Make Believe, which is an amazing pop song, well written. Um, then you get to the gorgeous, hauntingly beautiful I Won't Hold You Back, with a gorgeous guitar solo from Lukather. As simple as it is, the emotion that he put into that solo and that orchestral backup and those beautiful Timothy B. Schmidt backing vocals on that. Then you get to Good For You, and then It's a Feeling. But then you go to the second side, you've got the rocker that is Afraid of Love, into Lovers in the Night. We Made It As Fun. Waiting for Your Love could have been on a Michael Jackson album. The arrangement and everything that had a beautiful keyboard solo. And then you get to the juggernaut that is Africa. And this was the first time really hearing Africa without being distracted by it being on the radio and hearing, somebody else having a conversation at the same time. This is where I could go in and really listen to that tune and really take it in. And I don't know how long it took me to learn that chord progression in the verse section of that song. It took me a while because there's some weird things happening there. So, anyway, that album, Toto Force, really got me hooked on the band, and I was on a quest to basically hear everything that they've ever put out, and it took about 5 or 6 years, to do that. But needless to say, I think except for 2 albums that are very, very hard to find on CD right now, I've gotten nearly everything that they have as far as studio albums. I still need to get a couple of live albums, but yeah. All right, so Toto 4 is my number one. So now I'm just going to quickly recap through my top 10 albums of all time. Coming in at number one is Toto 4. Coming in at number 2 is High Infidelity by REO Speedwagon. Oh, I had a Magnus chord organ back when I was a kid too. I had two of them, I think. Number 3, Michael Jackson's Thriller. Probably could have put Bad in here too, because my aunt listened to that one a lot too. But that was a great album. Coming in at number 4 is Queen's The Game. Coming in at number 5 is Boston's Third Stage. Number 6 is Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Number 7 is Journey's Infinity. Number 8 is Face the Music by ELO, Electric Light Orchestra. Number 9 is the debut album from The Cars. These are all original copies, by the way. And number 10 is Sports by Huey Lewis and the News. I think maybe later on today, maybe tonight, I'll talk about the honorable mentions, so some of my other favorite albums of all time. And I don't know how many I would pull out, but I'll pull out quite a few of them. So you might see some empty spots on those shelves. But anyway, that's going to do it for this. Like I said, I might come back on later tonight after I grab a little bit of dinner to talk about, like I said, some of my other favorite albums. So I'm going to go ahead and do the obligatory be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Oh, thank you, Sean. Yeah, like I said, these are my top 10 favorites. But you'll see if once I pop back in with some more stuff that I pulled, I'll we'll go ahead and talk about some more stuff. So I'll probably be back in maybe about an hour and a half. But so if you like this video or anything else that you see on the channel, be sure to subscribe and be sure to click on the notification icon. You'll get notified anytime I release a video or I go live stream. I don't have a set schedule because I'm so busy with so many other projects at the time. So I try to go live whenever I can, whenever I have the energy. If you would like to help support the channel, go to my Bandcamp page and purchase some of my music over there. I think I've got a ton of stuff up there. I forgot how many albums. I've got the 2 instrumental EPs that I put out, and I've also got some other cool stuff up there. So check out my music over there, and feel free to make any purchases or whatever. But so there it is. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.